Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know by now, I think, because we're in our 22nd year, I interview artists every week for a half hour. Usually they're writers, but also often artists of another stripe, various stripes, actors, directors, filmmakers. We've had magicians and musicians on, people of all sorts. It's a wide net, so if you have ideas for a guest for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the program. I want to say tonight we do have an artist of a different stripe. He is partially a writer, but he's also a musician, he's also a director, he's also a talented theater manager. His name is Henry Allen, and he is the founder and director of the Cape Ann, based in the Blackburn building here in Gloucester. He's a relative newcomer to Cape Ann. He's been here just a little over 2 years, although I must say in those 2 years he's been a wonderful addition to the artistic life here. He is originally from the District of Columbia, attended college at Jacksonville in Florida, and then later the National Theater Conservatory. I'd like you with me to welcome Henry to the Writer's Block.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming down.
Oh, excited to be here.
Now that's a brief introduction, so you're going to have to fill that out a little bit.
Well,
Tell me something about what drew you to Cape Ann and Gloucester.
Well, 27 years ago, I studied at the Art Institute of Boston, and I was right out of high school, and someone whispered in my ear that I should come up to the North Shore and see Gloucester and Cape Ann. It was so beautiful. So I took the commuter train up and stepped off the train and found myself in a place like I had never been. And I grew up all over the world, so to have that kind of a visceral connection to a place was really poignant for me.
And it was automatic.
It was automatic, and I was here for 4 hours, I think, and it hooked my heart, and I knew I was going to end up here.
Name a couple of the places around the world where you also grew up. I want to know what we're competitive with.
Well, my father was a U.S. diplomat, and so I lived in Austria, the former USSR, Brazil, Cuba, Peru. We got around.
So Gloucester's right up there with Moscow and Rio.
Yes, exactly.
Vienna. Good. That's good to hear. So it took you 27 years to get back.
It did. I lost my son to brain cancer 3 years ago, and I was a single father. He was my only child, and I had to start my life over. And so Cameron and I had talked about moving here together when he was 18. Today he'd be 16, so we're just a few years off. But I knew it was my time.
So Gloucester is part of your surviving a tragedy and part of your rebirth after that?
It is. You know, I have felt called to this place for more than a quarter of a century. So I felt that now was the time to be here. I felt that pull all those years. It was anyone who's known me almost 30 years has known that I was going to end up in Gloucester.
And you're here to stay.
And I'm here to stay. You're stuck with me. Yeah.
We hope so. Tell me what you've been doing here since you arrived.
Well, immediately I got involved in theater. Working with youth has been a driving force in my career and in my life, and from a very early age. And so I just sort of opened the door and worked with the North of Boston Arts Center for about a year and a half out of Beverly. Directed 3 productions for them, including an original one that I worked on with the children. They wrote it. Yeah, it was called Tale of the Oyster, a Seafaring Whoops.
Where was it, in Beverly?
In Beverly, and it was all based on the music of Cole Porter and George and Ira Gershwin, which the children hadn't heard before, and many of their parents had never heard before, which really blew my mind. We did it at the Pingree School in Hamilton, but we rehearsed it in
I know you're familiar with Cole Porter because you choose some of his standards to
Yes, I do.
perform.
I love it. And the children loved it. I gave them 40 songs to choose from, and they wanted to use all of them. I said, hey, a full-length Broadway musical is, you know, they use 16 songs max. We got to boil this down, kids, you know. And we finally got it down to 22 songs. And we did medleys and found ways to use all of them. But it was inspired.
When was that?
This was about a year ago, spring of 2010.
Was that one of the first productions of the Cape Ann?
No,
was
that
that
was with another theater company. The first production of Cape Ann, or Henry Allen Theater Works, which is our resident theater company at the Cape Ann, was a little show called Greasy Pole the Musical.
just this summer of
This summer,
2011?
we opened officially in April.
I misunderstood. I thut you brought the Beverly program here.
No,
but
no.
The first one was the Greasy Pole.
This was, yeah, our first show here in Gloucester with the Annie was Greasy Pole the Musical, which more than 2,000 people saw in 2 weekends.
I heard it was very successful.
We were very fortunate that people resonated with it. It was a big risk, to have someone from here create a piece that was, so deeply entrenched in Cape Ann folklore and also the life of the people here and the heart of the people here.
I know in many respects you're new in Gloucester, unless your great-great-grandparent fished here.
Exactly, which mine didn't. I'm a Jew from, the Bronx. My father was born in the Bronx. My mother was from Philadelphia. So, my people came to a different port.
I want to get something organizationally straight. Now, you are
Yes.
the founder and director of the Cape Ann.
Yes.
Now, is that corporation an umbrella corporation under which the theater exists?
Correct. We have
And the theater's name again is?
Henry Allen Theater Works.
Henry Allen Theater Works,
Yes.
a wholly owned subsidiary
Yes.
of the Cape Ann.
Yes. Well, we also
Something like
have the
that.
art parlor, which is in our now grand lobby since we took out a wall. And we showcase visual art from local artists, which is very exciting. We have bookings all the way through the end of the year and into the spring already. That's thrilling.
Good.
And we also are starting something brand new this fall called the Conservatory. And it's the conservatory in the botanical sense that we're cultivating unique specimens. One of the things that I noted here on Cape Ann is that a lot of the youth that are going into the arts professionally are not doing it here. They're leaving and they're going to other places and they're not returning, which leaves us with an aging arts community that isn't really going to be sustained for more than another 10 to 20 years. And the horror of the idea of having a drought in the arts on Cape Ann sort of propelled me to do something about it.
Good.
And
good.
so it's a mentorship program, an after-school mentorship program, where young people who are interested in going into the arts will work with working professionals in the arts, not professional teachers, but professionals who teach, to help them hone their craft, but also to teach them the business of being an artist. I'm conservatory trained. I have a lot of friends
I was
who've
going to say
gone
you
through.
borrowed your name in part from the National Theater Conservatory.
Well, it inspired me because I really felt that they helped me develop my unique instrument. And what they didn't do, and most schools, whether they're undergraduate or graduate programs in this country, don't do still today, is teach the business of show business. Teach young artists how to be entrepreneurs and how to develop multiple streams of income and market themselves and promote themselves. Social networking now, you have to know how to do in order to be forward thinking in your career. I mean, we're talking about an
Yeah.
industry where there's a 98% unemployment rate amongst professionals. So you got to love it.
I think I commend that, and I think it's absolutely necessary. I get sort of, in my crabby old age, tired of hearing about artists who sort of feel they have a God-given obligation.
I'm an artist. I don't have to be a
obligation
business
to be
person.
flaky.
Those days are
And my
gone.
feet aren't on the floor,
Right.
and I'm proud of that. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I know that not only myself, but there are working artists, long-term working artists, historically here on Cape Ann, that have created a foundation upon which we can build with the youth of Cape Ann. And we want them to come back and reinvest in the community, but we have to invest in them first. And so, I'm excited about it. Our first project will be a teen cabaret that we are developing. And our theme that we're working with for the first one is originality, that these young people who are not only actors or singers or dancers, but also technicians and designers, costume designers, lighting design, makeup design, are going to be bringing original ideas fresh ideas to the stage.
I love the idea that a student in high school level or college level, at some point, although you have to branch out, but at some point you should be able to do everything from moving lamps around to walking on stage,
Yes.
and everything in between.
Well, that's
It's
really
a
the
wonderful,
training of an
wonderful
artist,
training,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Before we went on the air, you were talking about 3 approaches that you have classified or
3
organized your
passions
life around.
in my
3
life,
passions, and
yeah.
we've been talking about the dramatic passion.
Yes.
What are the other 2?
Out of my experience with my son, who lived with brain cancer for 2 years, from the age of 11 to 13 when he passed, he and I together created a foundation, a charitable foundation called the Brain Candy Project. And it's a support system for parents who are living in hospitals with their critically ill children. We spent months and months in the hospital, actually in 3 different hospitals in Minnesota. And some do better than others in terms of how they hold the caretaker, the parent usually. But some fall way short of what those needs really are. And many of the families that we met during those months were from other parts of the state. They were from rural communities, other states, or even other countries, leaving their families and their communities to find the best care for their children to try and save their lives, which means that they're in utter isolation, going through a nightmare. Nobody, no community around them to bring them a hot meal or an air mattress or a kind word or even nail clippers, good food to help sustain them during those months or even years that they're in critical care with their child. And so my son and I thought, you know, this is something that we can do. We were fortunate enough that we were treated where we lived, and so everything we needed was at our elbow. So we're paying that spirit of community forward. Anyone who comes to our hospitals here in Massachusetts, you know, from far away or from other parts of the state, they have no one around them to hold them. And that's our tagline, is holding parents so parents can hold their children.
And where is, and it's a wonderful name, by the way.
Thank you.
Was that a name that you and your son came
Well,
up with
it's
together?
a bit of a nod to Cameron. When he was about 2 years old, he nicknamed himself Candy. So the Brain Candy Project is a nod to
It's a good
him.
name.
But you think of eye candy as something that's easy on your eyes. Brain candy relieves the minds of these parents who are there watching their children's backs. You know, who's got their back?
And where are you active?
We're
where's
active
Brain
right
Candy?
now in Minnesota, and I've now been talking to Boston Children's Hospital and a few other hospitals in the area about how we can bring these services. It's a global vision. There are parents sleeping on hospital chairs and floors of hospitals all over the world.
Change is difficult always for institutions, no matter what sort
It
of
is,
institution.
and
Are they open or?
You know, they tend to be, the nurses and nurse managers and the doctors, they love this idea of having a community-driven effort to hold these parents and say, while you're here and you're benefiting our community by choosing our hospitals, you're one of us, and we'll take care of you as if you were one of us. When you get to the hospital attorneys, that's where the buck usually stops, or sticks, I should say. We have, you know, there are a lot of legalities around privacy issues, for instance, that we have to overcome because of the HIPAA laws, the privacy laws in American hospitals. I couldn't be on the same ward with another family and meet them in the hall and say, so what brings you here? Because that would be an invasion of their privacy, and they could sue the hospital. You know, and hospitals are very sketchy about that.
Yeah,
so
I can imagine.
we have to circumvent and find a way to navigate those waters in a way that gets these parents the support that they need, and still have the hospital itself invest in holding those parents. You know, family-centered hospital care is what we're after.
How can our viewers find out more about the Brain Candy Foundation?
They can go to www.braincandyproject.org. And that's our website. It's a virtual office that I have, so I can be anywhere and be facilitated.
Would you repeat that again?
Yes.
The address?
www.braincandyproject.org.
One word, braincandyproject.org.
Braincandyproject.org. We have raised enough to establish our first permanent endowment at the University of Minnesota Children's Hospital, where my son Cameron was treated. And it will provide parking for parents who are living in that hospital. I was paying up to $40 a day for parking while I was living in the hospital with my child. And these families who are coming from other parts of the state or other places, and they've driven there, many of them are on one income because one parent is giving up their income to be with their child. And so
It's wonderful that
it's a
those,
big
those
deal.
practical, detailed, not so overtly romantic details are extremely important.
They're
I know-
vitally
I know from my own
important.
experience, parking.
Yeah,
Parking
it's
those tickets is a very
excruciating,
big
especially if you're on
problem.
a limited income, and it's those small things that we're thinking ahead for those families because we've been through that experience. We know what we needed in retrospect. While we were in it, we had no idea what we needed. People would come and say, "What do you need?" And I would say, "I've never done this before. I have no idea what I need. Think about what you might need, and then just do it. Don't even ask." And people did that, and that really inspired me. And we're constantly growing and developing. We
I
have
hope you get some hits from our.
a number of different
our viewer
initiatives.
audience
Well, and my
out there.
son Cameron was a great part in it. His hand in it is a magazine that he developed called Brain Candy to be written by and for children who are living with critical illness as a way to bridge them. He said, "Papa, when you're on chemotherapy and radiation and steroids and all the other 30 pills a day he was taking at the age of 12, you can't be around a lot of other children because a cold could kill you." And so he wanted to bridge these children around the world, let them know they're not alone in their disease,
Wonderful
and that they
for him.
have a community,
Wonderful
a global
for him.
community. They could write stories about themselves. They could write, maybe even help the adults find a cure is what he was after too. So very proud of him for that. And it gives me a chance to channel my grief into service, which is a very important part of who I am.
Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to make a complete turn back
Yes.
to Cole Porter.
Oh, yes.
And the third avenue of your energies, which I believe you said is
Is my
playing,
music.
your music.
Yes, I'm a singer. I'm a crooner, some people have said. My band is called Henry Allen and the New Swing Set. And it actually developed out of, and how's this for a segue, the Brain Candy Project. Every year, April 16th, which would have been my son's birthday, rather than sitting at home and sulking, I have a concert, a benefit concert in honor of his
For the
vision
foundation.
for the foundation. The first one was at the Annie this year in April, so that was exciting. And but I was new here and I didn't know many musicians, and the few that I did gave me names of musicians to call to back me up. And other people weren't available or they just didn't do benefits. And so I was really in a pinch, and I had looked for 2 months for artists to back me up, jazz musicians, and couldn't find anyone. So I put a desperate plea out on Craigslist looking for someone. This was 4 days before the event. And I had these amazing musicians, 3 of them especially, come out of the blue.
Who, can you name them?
Yes, Arnie Rosen, who's from Belmont.
Arnie
He
Rosen.
is my guitarist. And Andrea Rupert, who is from Salem. She's my standing bass. And Stephanie Stone, who is saxophone and flute and percussion. She's from Melrose. So they're from all over the place. They hadn't played together before. They didn't know each other before. And independently, they responded to my ad saying, "We went to the Brain Candy Project website. We believe in your cause. Don't think about paying us. We'll show up." We met the day of the event.
So you had good energy.
No rehearsal.
Good energy.
And we did a 3-hour concert with no rehearsal. And we sounded so great together. We thought, how can we not start a band? So we did, and now it's been over a year.
I heard you once at the Franklin.
At the Franklin
I think
Cafe.
Last winter. I
Yes.
think you were with one other musician. You were
That
singing.
would have been Arnie
the-
Rosen, my
on
guitarist. yeah.
guitar, yeah.
We do duos a lot around town. Some venues are more intimate, like the Franklin, and so to squeeze a standing bass and a saxophone, and it's not really conducive. So often we'll just do a duo rather than the trio behind me.
Now, we can't mention any specific date because this show will be on at different times.
Sure.
But are you at the Franklin or other venues in Gloucester?
I've performed at the Franklin.
regularly?
I've performed at Latitude 43 with Mark Early. I have a regular standing gig at the Greenland Cafe in Salem. And you can go to their website. I think it's thegreenlandcafe.com and look at their calendar. So we're there monthly. And we're always looking for gigs. We also played a lot of private parties. And we don't just do jazz or swing. We mix it up with a lot of Brazilian bossa nova and some Motown and some blues and also some modern stuff we put our own spin on. So it's a lot of fun, and it's another way for me to sort of put myself out there, and it's a very healing thing. After Cameron died, it took me over a year to be able to sing again. It actually took me moving here to be able to sing again.
Gloucester.
It opened me up. Gloucester opened me up.
I've got a kind of a semi-technical question. It always intrigues me because it's got to do with the real world. You're active in theater, and you have the
Yes.
foundation, and you are a musician. How do you divide your attention between these or among these activities? Is it like 3 hours on this, 3 hours on that, or Monday's this, Tuesday? Is there a plan
Somehow,
there?
some way, it all sort of works together. They all of these three passions that I have work symbiotically together, and my visual art too. I take time to paint and sculpt and do other things. I'm always busy, and scheduling wise, I don't even think about it. It all just sort of works itself out, which is amazing to me. And that's a mark of being in the right place at the right time, where you're meant to
If
be.
you're happy with what you're doing.
And you're passionate, that's a big, if anyone can take, permission for living their best life from the choices that I've made and what I'm able to do in my life and career. I like to talk about that a lot because I think a lot of people find themselves stuck in a career for the money, for the security. One of my favorite people, one of my favorite figures in history was Helen Keller. And one of her quotes was about security. And I learned this at an early age, and it stayed with me all my life. She says that it's mostly a myth, that it does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Life is either a grand adventure or nothing. And those words really live in me. I feel that, we're here when we're here, and we can do what we're passionate about. We can create the space for that.
I've read biologists saying that our basal state is fear,
Yeah.
because you have to be always on the alert for enemies, as an evolved animal.
Yeah.
And happiness is a few minutes when it's gone.
Well, and
I'm not quite that
there's a
pessimistic.
really, it's kind of interesting. Since about the age of 8, I've only had one fear in my life that I can identify that's really a true fear. I remember my third grade, my teacher asking us, "What's your biggest fear?" And the only thing I could think of was outliving my children. And what my son leaving the planet when he was meant to leave, for whatever it's worth, gave me, the gain in that loss, was that I'm fearless now.
It's a wonderful way to be.
It is a wonderful way to be.
I haven't reached that state.
Well, and I certainly hope it doesn't take people losing their children to find that. But I think that if you are in a place in your life where you can really say, what's the worst that could happen? To me, the worst that could happen that I could conceive has happened. So it's a measuring stick for everything else that comes along. And the things that have so much weight in a person's life usually end up not amounting to a hill of beans, to quote Casablanca.
I just got the 5-minute signal from our cameraman, Alex, so I want to begin to wrap up. Can you very quickly tell me what's on the planning board at the theater?
Well, we're doing a lot of work with youth, but all of the work that we do is also intergenerational. This fall, opening October 20th, we have Song of the Sea, which is part of my Young Playwrights series, and it's a fanciful story about Cape Ann folklore. But it's through the perspective of 2 crusty old Gloucester school lunch ladies, and it's a riot, completely conceived and written by children.
So give us the website for the theater.
www.theannie.org.
Theannie.org.
Theannie.org.
And braincandyproject.org.
Yes.
And do you, as a musician, have another
I have
virtual
a MySpace page. You can also find us on Twitter, and you can also find us on. But all of those links are at theannie.org.
Henry Allen, thank you very much for being on the Writer's Block this evening.
Thank you for having
I
me.
very
It's
much
been a pleasure.
appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
I want to thank all our viewers in TV land for being with the Writer's Block this evening as well. Before I close, I want to mention a play that found its origins here in Gloucester called The Yates Game, and then it later moved to Boston. And it's going to be in New York in February of 2012. And there's a website where you can get more information about that. I hope you can. It's my play, and I'm interested in you being interested. The website is theyatesgame.org. Again, thank you for being on the Writer's Block. If you've learned something from Henry Allen about his foundation, about the theater, about music, about Cole Porter, then the Writer's Block has done its job. See you again next week on the Writer's Block.